What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. I am here in Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to another episode of the REI Live podcast, Real Estate Investing Live. We interview the very best entrepreneurs and real estate investors all throughout the country. And today I'm very excited for a very special guest, Mr. Eric Moeller. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you. I was supposed to ask you that off air, and then I forgot. So glad I did it right.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about this episode. Every once in a while, we'll bring somebody on who's going to talk about a subject that we just have not talked about on this podcast before. And this is episode number 105 of interviewing the very best entrepreneurs and real estate investors all throughout this great, incredible country that we have. And we're going to be talking about Airbnb. So that's the setup. That's the setup. I don't want you to give away any big details right now, but give us give us a little teaser. What are we going to be talking about?
Yeah, so love to share with everybody the opportunities that Airbnb is bringing to the real estate investing industry, if you will. My background is in real estate investing. I was investing. I got started at a very early age, 19 years old, and built a development company, all of that on the East Coast. And, so when I found the Airbnb and I found the opportunities behind Airbnb, I approached it as a real estate investor. Mm-hmm. And we can get into this, but now I'm 100% in Airbnb. I haven't bought a property in nearly 3 years. But we have properties all throughout San Diego, Colorado. We had a bunch down in Mexico, Canada, New York City, New Jersey, and it's a really great model. So, we can go in so many different rabbit holes with this, but Airbnb has opened up opportunities for investors to repurpose their real estate for a different, I call it a different asset class now. It is. It is. And it's incredible. And it's, to me, the future of real estate, the way that people are going to start developing houses and apartment buildings and condos, all of that, we can get into that rabbit hole. And then, there's additional ways to leverage Airbnb. As real estate investors, we're so used to the phrase OPM, other people's money, and learning how to leverage other people's money to buy real estate.
And are you going to tell me that this is OPP?
OPP, baby. That's it.
We're
other
down with OPP.
Property. That's it. Other people's properties. And that's the model that I focus in, is like leveraging other people's properties versus investing in it. So like I said, there's so many different avenues that we can go down, and I'm open to talking about all of them. I love them. Dude, all.
I'm a child of the 90s. I grew up on 90s hip hop. I'm totally down with OPP. I'm totally, that was like our middle school anthem in like 1992. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about all this stuff. I think you're right. I actually had some, what you called a rabbit trail. I had like a lot of stuff written down that I wanted to get into with you. And I think that you're right. There's a lot of different directions we can go, and we're going to try to go into a lot of them. But before we do all that, I really want to understand your story, because you're now living in San Diego. You said you did a bunch of stuff on the East Coast. You got involved in real estate at a very young age, 19. You don't look that old now.
I'll be 32 in February.
Yeah. So, but you've still been in it for, sounds like 12, 13, 14 years.
That's all I've ever done.
So talk about that for a second. Talk to the guy or girl who might be listening to this, who's graduating high school, doesn't know what they want to do. And it sounds to me like you found real estate. Tell us that story.
Yeah, man. I love sharing this story. So I was the typical entrepreneur kid growing up. Like if you can picture what that kid looks like, especially in high school, couldn't focus, constantly, just bouncing around, trying to figure out a passion, all of that. At a very early age, I was always attracted to real estate. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up right outside Manhattan. And growing up around there, you see all the buildings popping up. And I lived in an area that was just constantly growing, real estate-wise. Constantly people are injecting in there. So I was always interested in real estate, always growing up. And I got to high school and played football, all that stuff. And once sports ended, I realized I have zero interest in school right now as a freshman. And long story short, I joined a tech school. I told my mom that I was going to drop out of high school and start a business cutting grass. And she's like, no, you're not. You're going to do this. You're going to stay in high school. Got to this tech school where they taught you construction half of the week, and then taught you a trade. And then the other half of the week, they would teach you regular academics. Well, the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me, because I met a high school teacher named Frank, who was my construction teacher. Long story short, he was an entrepreneur. He had multiple businesses outside of his school career, his teaching career. And he gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because I was always talking about starting businesses and all that stuff. So at 17 years old, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in high school, which, you know, I'm sure every single person that's listening right now has read that book. And if they haven't, they should. And that just sparked so much interest, man. And my last year of high school, I still had Frank as a teacher, and I don't know how he did this, but he created a program to where instead of me going to school for the last year of high school, I actually was able to go to a job site and work for a real estate investor who was buying up properties all up the coast, rehabbing them, and then selling them to executives in New York City. And this investor, and it was awesome. I was, 18 years old, 17, 18, and I was a laborer sweeping floors and all that stuff. But she taught me OPM. She taught me how to leverage other people's money, how to, the whole flip game at a very early age. And luckily I had some amazing parents that seen that I was interested in this, and they just allowed me to immerse myself in that. Full support on it. And by the time I was 19, during that period, I joined the construction union because I knew the carpenters union, because I knew I wanted to learn construction, to develop real estate, all of that. And by the time I was 19, I went through every course you can go through, all the seminars. I fully immersed myself in education.
And that would have been, about what? 2001, 2? Oh no, 4.
I graduated high school 2005. So right in that range. Gotcha. 2004 to 2006 were my full immersion, learning everything about real estate investing. This was the time that banks were giving away 110% financing to pretty much anybody.
Right.
I convinced my father, who's not a wealthy man, I convinced my father to leverage his credit to buy a property in town. Got 110% financing, and we bought our first home. I moved into the basement. I would go to the construction job site in the day to learn construction, come home and work on the house at night. And we did that for about 4 months. We flipped it and made some money. Took that learning lesson and those funds and immediately put it into our next property, which happened to be a vacation rental in the famous Jersey Shore. So we bought the vacation rental. We started renting it out during the summer, making a ton of money. At that time, Airbnb didn't exist. Right. So the vacation rental market was very old school. It was run by very old property management companies, things like that. But I fell in love with the model of vacation rentals because we bought this property and we were able to rent it out. At that time, it was week by week. And we were renting it out for like $2,500 to $3,000 a week. And our mortgage payment was $5,000 a month. So we were making a lot of money. And then the market crashed, and that kind of got me we got out of the vacation rental side. And that just led a whole chain of real estate investing, from figuring out short-term rentals and everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let me just kind of jump in. I do want you to tell the rest of that story. But sure. Let me just interject. I got a couple questions. First, we have a lot of young people listening to this. Like we really do. I get asked a lot of questions by some people that jump on the comments and everything. And these people are like 22, 23, 24 years old. And it's like the thing that they have different than you, it sounds like you had great parents that you already acknowledged that kind of put you in a position to succeed. And you had programs available to you that a lot of people especially in the deep South where I am, it just doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's definitely not on that level. Take a second, Eric, and just talk to that person who might be 22, 23, graduated from college, maybe even 18 or 19, graduated from high school, has no idea what to do. It sounds to me like the pivotal moment for you was basically that free mentorship, like the mentorship part of it.
Yeah. So the one thing that completely changed the game, and the one thing that I looking back that I noticed about myself then, because I got into real estate investing, I had a lot of friends that were interested in it, same age as me, 18, 19. And then all the years going through, I've constantly seen the younger crowds come up and then they disappear. It's a really challenging business to get started when you're south of 30, you know? And one thing that I did was the immersion part. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, it's fully immersing. Being fully immersed in the educational part of real estate investing, constantly like listening to podcasts like this one, reading books, constantly going to seminars. And I was paying for all that stuff myself. It wasn't like I had family with money. We came from blue collar. Right. I come from a blue collar background. So all of that stuff I had to earn myself and pay for myself. But the difference was I jumped in 110% consistently all the time. It was like I could not get enough of reading books. And back then podcasts weren't big, but it was courses, reading every single course, going through every single course, going to every single meetup group I can find. I did this for years until I got to a point where we're actually making real money. You know, and I could talk about all the down parts of living in garages, living in basements, like not having funds to feed myself, to get to a point where I can figure out the game to start growing it.
So Eric, you said something that really hits home with me. And I think it hits home with a lot of the people that are probably already doing the business and already successful that I think gets overlooked. It sounds to me like you were saying you were absolutely sold out to real estate. You devoured everything. So when I first got into it in 2012, you've been doing this way longer than me. I got into it in 2012. And when these books were first put in front of me, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I remember going to a Rich Dad seminar.
Yeah.
And they gave me a free book. It was like a 150-page book called Find It, Close It, Profit. I read that 150 pages, and it was like a textbook. It was really big.
Yeah.
I read that in one night, one sitting, because I was so my mind was blown at this thing called real estate. I'd never heard of it before. But what I've learned since then is that the people that have gone on to be successful in this business are the ones who are devouring every podcast that they can get their hands on, all the free information on YouTube that they can get their hands on, the books. They're actually like just consuming themselves with the information. And then the key point is going out and actually taking action and applying what they've learned. It sounds to me like you had a lot of that in you.
100%, man. 100%. It's, Conor McGregor. Hold on, let me shut my window. Sorry about that. We have a big development happening outside. So Conor McGregor talks about all the time, like he envisioned himself being a champion. And so whoever doesn't know Conor McGregor, he's a UFC double champ, right? First one ever to do that. And he's a big inspiration of mine. But he talks about as he was coming up in the ghettos of Dublin, that as a broke kid, being 16, trying to figure out how to make a career out of fighting, he had the blinders on to everything else. And he still talks about it. I don't know anything else other than fighting. Yeah. The fight game, I own that game. And looking back, I realized I did the same thing for real estate, because real estate in my mind was investing was the way that I was going to break the cycle of my family having to trade time for dollars, right? Always working with their hands and never getting ahead. Like that was immersed, like embedded in me. So I attached such a big emotional outcome to the success of real estate investing that I had no other option to read as much as possible, take action as much as possible, surround myself with gurus. And like, this was just me constantly outreaching to people, constantly trying to figure it out. Got a lot of rejection because I was, a 21-year-old kid, but people notice when you're that young and you are so passionate about something. Even though if you don't have funds, I didn't come from a wealthy family. I didn't have any money to invest. I was still very green to the industry, but people noticed that and they were willing to educate and lead me. And it led me to where I'm at today, which is amazing.
It's awesome. It's a great story. And it's a lot of similarities in your story and my story.
Awesome.
Except I went to college and got into a lot of debt. That's the only difference. So let's kind of, it sounds like you had the stage set for you a little bit in the sense that you were already doing vacation rentals, or at least you bought the one, with the help of your parents. Did you do that because it was just right there and it was kind of easy, it was low hanging fruit? Or did you really see this is the big opportunity, this is the gap in the market?
Yeah. So again, at the time, this was prior to the market crash.
Right.
So, they were giving out mortgages 110%, 120% mortgages.
Right. But you could have gone and bought a single family residence.
100%. Yeah. So what was happening was at that time, there was a few other people that I grew up with that were kind of my age that were in the mortgage side, that were making a ton of money, selling mortgages and all that stuff. So, and constantly surrounding myself with investors and all this stuff, just learning, you see all these different opportunities. And I started noticing going to these local meetup or REI groups, that this investment group from the town that I grew up in were buying properties in South Jersey, vacation rentals. They were buying brand new condos, and they had a mortgage company that would give them 110% financing to buy it. Right. And I thought the same thing. I'm like, why don't we just buy, fix, and flip? Right. You get this big sum of, funds. And then, again, Rich Dad Poor Dad teaches you how to create passive income, right? And like bring passive income into your portfolio. So I was just introduced to an opportunity. Someone brought the opportunity, like, hey, we can get 110% financing. If you can find somebody with good credit, we can get 110% financing. So I was like, hey, Dad, you got good credit. Let me use that, which turned out to be a bad idea because the market crashed after that. And that's a story we can get into. But that's how I got introduced to vacation rentals, was just through an opportunity of networking with somebody who said, like, hey, we have an opportunity to partner with developers, buy turnkey properties, rent them out to people that are coming to the Jersey Shore. And then you don't even have to put any money up because this guy will give you 110% financing for it. That was the introduction to it. Then once I got down there, I'm like, man, I love this. I don't have to deal with crappy properties, crappy sellers. These are turnkey, beautiful homes, and people are paying me thousands of dollars a week, and they're happy when they're there because it's a beautiful house right down the block from the beach. So that was the introduction to it. And then I started realizing that I can start bringing investors down to this community to buy properties. And we started doing that. And I started helping them run their vacation rentals.
So you were acting as what, a property manager, or like not a private money broker, but like almost like a broker getting a cut of?
In a way. So again, I was still very young getting involved in this. So I was a connector. So I realized that these developers and these mortgage brokers, all they wanted was cash investors or people that had good credit that they could buy these homes.
And you just went and found those people, but you made money doing that, right?
Yeah. We got paid for doing that. Part of the spread. So essentially an investor would buy up all these investment homes and then connect with other investors and put a spread on it and then flip them out with the vacation rental business in place. So I did that a little bit because shortly after that, the market crashed.
So how did that affect you? How did the market crashing affect you?
It was brutal, man. We lost 50% in value on the home overnight. Literally, the entire market, this specific market, lost 50% of value. So, and it was an emotional hit. It wasn't a financial hit because I was 21, 22 years old at this time when it hit, right around that era. But I brought my father in who, with his credit, and I'm like, man, all right, I got to figure this out for the family because we were about to lose everything. That's how I got into short-term rentals. I figured out, I'm like, oh, everybody around here has the same problem as me. They owe 50% more on their mortgage than what they can sell it for. And that led into me. I literally had to move into the garage for 6 months while I was figuring out the short-term rental process, locking up other properties, things like that, helping other homeowners through short-term rentals. And that led into me partnering with a group, and we did over 100 short-term rentals in this community.
Doing what specifically? Like you partnered with some other people to what was the strategy?
Yeah. So if you remember back in the day when short-term rentals first became like pop, it was like an investment deal, like right around 2008, 2009,
Mhm.
2010.
Right.
It was really, really hot to invest in short-term rentals. And essentially what we were doing, we would find somebody who was completely upside down on their mortgage. We would go in and typically we would find properties that needed some type of repair to it,
Right.
right? It was distressed in some way. They left, so the pipes froze and all that stuff. So we would find something that we had to add some money into. We would secure a contract with the homeowner at X amount of price. We would take that contract, bring it to their bank, and we would negotiate with the bank
Like a
the
short
short-term
sale.
rental. Yeah. Then what we would do is we would buy it at that price, line up another cash investor, and
Got it.
we would either do the fix and then flip it out to them for a vacation rental, or we would just flip it out for the price and make a spread between our contract and another contract. So we did about 100 of those.
So you're basically just doing short sales.
We were doing short sales and we were doing short sale signees or whatever
So
that's called.
you were doing short sale assignments.
Assignments, yes. Yeah.
So, but they're kind of irrelevant now, but
Mm-hmm.
it just sounds like to me that it's always been this way for you. Your back was up against the wall and you just figured out a way.
Yeah, you got it, man. It's like there's always a solution to any challenge that's out there, right? And it's like if you have the confidence and the patience to go through it and figure out where that light was coming in, you can figure out that solution. And it's something that's always been instilled in me by my father, and it turned into a business for me.
Talk more about that for a second, because I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of like an intangible piece that most don't have.
Mm.
And the way I say it is, and this is the way it was taught to me, and I believe this, is that people don't just change. You kind of are who you are,
Mm.
unless you're faced with like massive adversity, your back's up against the wall. Sounded like to me, your back was up against the wall. But the thing is, though, most people would just shrink down. You said
Right.
it was kind of instilled in you by your father. What can you point to something specifically, Eric, that your father may have taught you either directly or indirectly that made
Yeah.
feel this way or think this way?
I mean, it's hard to, I think about that a lot because I realize like I'm here in San Diego now because of so many different points that my back was against the wall. And we can get into that, but my back was against the wall again. And it led me to this amazing lifestyle that I'm living, running this incredible business. Right. But I think like going back when I was a child, we weren't poor, but my father used to say it all the time. You have a roof above your head, you have the lights on and food on the table. That's all you need. If you need anything else, go out and earn it. Right.
Mm.
And like any single time me and my brother, I have a brother and an older sister. And anytime we would ask my dad for money, like, hey, Dad, can I have $20 to go to the movies? He's like, yeah, come outside. Give us a shovel. We're like, what the hell is this? He's like, start digging a hole. And we're like, all right, now what? Fill it back in. And he's like, here's your $20. Right. Like he never had the mindset of like he was so old school and still is so old school, always worked with his hands, earned everything by working with his hands, that he instilled in us that like there's no free handouts. If there's a challenge, if you need money, whatever it is, you go to work and you figure it out. And the whole thing about digging the holes, and I appreciate it now. Back then I thought he was, a jerk for doing that. But essentially his whole thing is like, I don't care if you have to go out and dig holes for a living.
Mm-hmm.
You don't sit on the couch and expect things to change. You go out and change it. And, growing up, we had some really tough times financially, and he always got us out of it. Or both of my parents always got us out of it. So it's like, I think that's instilled in you. And then, you toss in the whole other aspect of the entrepreneur. I don't know if entrepreneurs are born, made, or both, but at a very early age, I was introduced to that. I'm like, man, I want to become a multimillionaire. Like that's all I was focused on. Right. Yeah. Now I have bigger, aspirations than just making money, but it's interesting, man. And I noticed that those patterns. And I think like currently, and just to wrap up that conversation a little bit, I think at the end of every diversity, there is beauty. And that's for everything. Like no matter where the stress is coming from, like stressing your body every single day in the gym, right? it sucks. It sucks for everybody to push themselves beyond exhaustion in the gym. But at the end of the tunnel, there's a beauty that comes from that, from health, the way that you look, the way that you feel, the way that you think, all of that, you know? And the same thing with business.
I agree. So let's we're going to talk about Airbnb for you guys that are listening. You're like, oh my gosh, it's total clickbait. You put Airbnb everywhere. We barely even said the word.
We'll get to it.
We're getting to it for sure, because I want you to kind of set the stage. You mentioned a second ago that you kind of, you hit some adversity even to get to where you are today, or even how you're even in the Airbnb space. Yep. What happened? What led you to doing primarily Airbnb real estate?
Yeah, man. So again, I was living on the East Coast, New Jersey. And at that time I had a real estate investment company. And we specialized in, I had two partners, and we specialized in buying the worst possible properties in New Jersey. The properties that other investors wouldn't even touch. Properties with contamination, hoarder properties, structural issue properties, all of that. And we weren't just a typical fix and flip. Of course we did those, but we specialized in completely tearing down properties and building up from the ground up, or adding on an outrageous amount of square footage, right? So massive redevelopments. And we grew that, man. I busted my ass to make sure that this company grew. And unfortunately I didn't know enough to structure the right partnerships with the right people. So I got stuck in a really nasty partnership, which restricted the growth of the company for us hiring people, all that other stuff, right? So I was the guy wearing all these different hats to make this company successful. And at this time, my breaking point was we had 15 massive redevelopments going on all throughout the state of New Jersey. We had just got into apartment buildings. So we started reinvesting our funds back into multifamily. So anywhere from like 2 to 12 units. And it wasn't a lot. We were testing it out, but we had some pretty big projects going.
Right.
Long story short, all within the same week, two of my apartment buildings that we were working on, one, the roofer set the whole building on fire the last day of construction, after a year of renovating this thing. And that turned out to be a blessing. But at the time, I'm like, this is horrible to deal with. And we had people living in the building too, which was terrifying. And within the same week, the brand new six unit apartment building that we just finished renovating, and we spent months choosing what it is in a really tough area in New Jersey. We choose months choosing who we wanted to get into the building. Within a week, unfortunately, somebody got shot and killed outside our building. And we found out that he was buying crack from the very nice old lady that we rented one of the apartments to. She was selling it outside of her the window. All within a week, all this stuff happened. So I'm dealing with the cops on all that, and I got burnt out, man. I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I can't, like, all the flipping and like the bad partnerships, everything. We were making money, but I was working around the clock, and I did not see how we can scale this company to get to a point where I can step back and buy my time, like Robert Kiyosaki talks about, right? It's always been the vision. I'm like, I need a break, man. So I sold, long story short, I sold my equity to my partners. I cashed out what I could.
What year was that, Eric?
This was going on nearly 4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you sold out your equity and you did what? You moved to San Diego?
No, I started traveling for 6 months because I knew, I was burnt out with real estate, but I knew that I loved real estate. I wanted to stay in real estate, but I wanted to figure out a way that I can grow real estate with technology injected into it. So I didn't have to worry about all the stuff that we have to worry about as investors.
Got it.
Fix and flip investors. So I traveled the country, going to all these masterminds. I did that for 6 months, staying at Airbnbs. And at that time, I didn't realize that there was a business model there. There was no gurus, there was no books, there was no podcast on it, nothing. This was nearly 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago. And I got to San Diego for an event, a mastermind. I was here for a week, started talking to the host that I was staying with. And up to this point, Airbnb was only a room share type of platform. If you have an extra bedroom, you rent it out on Airbnb. I met this host who completely changed my life. I realized I was renting an apartment above his garage, And I realized that him and his wife were renting out the bedrooms in their front house. And they also had a guest house that they were renting out. And I started talking to the guy, and I found out, long story short, I found out that he was making $1,000 a month above his rent at the house. And two things blew my mind. I'm like, all right, one, you're living for free and you're making $1,000 on top of that. That's incredible. And two, you don't own the property. You're renting this house and you're making that money. I'm like, all right, there's a model here. And then he started opening up to me. He's like, yeah, like here's all the digital locks and everything. Now this is pretty standard, but back then it blew my mind. This guy ran everything from his cell phone, So I'm like, all right, I'm staying here, man. So I stayed in San Diego. I haven't left. I stayed in San Diego. I'm like, this is the business model that I'm going to grow. I'm just going to go out, rent up a ton of people's properties, stage them, and then put them up on Airbnb and make money. And that's what I did. And that's how I started my company in Airbnb.
So let's just jump right into it now. What challenges did you see right off the bat? Like, cause it sounds like you just jumped right on in.
I jumped right in. Yeah.
So you're going to face some challenges in the beginning. What were they?
So there was a few major challenges. Excuse me. One major challenge was the education side of it. At that time, there was nobody in the space
right,
educating Airbnb, because this model wasn't talked about. Nobody really figured that out. We were all figuring it out at the same time.
Got it. Yep.
So that was the biggest issue, is learning. So again, I fully immersed myself for nearly 6 months. I just, I learned every aspect of short-term rentals, technology, excuse me, technology, what properties would work, all of that, how it actually works on the Airbnb platform. And so what I did was I reinvested all that money, the equity that I cashed out of my investment company, into this, and I leased up everything. Another challenge that I ran into is educating owners on the model of Airbnb, right?
Because in the beginning, were you just kind of, I don't want to say going behind their back, but they just didn't know what was going on?
The first few, I didn't realize that was a problem to do. Yeah. So the first few, and this is talking from a landlord, a real estate investor that signed, hundreds of leases before. It's like, I didn't realize it was a problem that I needed to disclose this. And then I ran into some problems, and I was like, I got to disclose this. I got to get the owners on board for me to do that. We got kicked out of a couple of them, and I didn't fight them. I'm like, all right, I understand it. You guys are mad. I was in the wrong, so I'll leave, type of thing. So we lost a lot of money on a few of these rentals and testing all that out. But then we started realizing, we started developing systems and processes like any startup would do, right? And we figured out, like, we have to partner with these owners on these models, right? We bring it to them as as an option for them to make either additional money on their rental, or partner with a secured company that will rent for them for years and years and years.
Right.
So then we learned that, and we figured out a system. We started approaching owners, and once we did that, it just started compounding. We got to a point where we had to shut off how many properties we were taking on. It just grew.
Right.
And then there were some other challenges that came along.
Right. So this is, kind of getting over the initial kind of shock or the initial challenges. What did that take you? 6 months, a year, to where you really had this thing humming?
Yeah. I mean, at that time, it was a year where I was like, I don't know how to make this work, because once you get the property, the biggest challenge is getting an owner to say, yeah, you could do this. Right. Then you're like, oh, crap, how do I stage it? Right. And it's not just buying furniture. You have to buy everything else, from sheets to towels to shampoo to coffee to spoons to garbage cans, all this other stuff, right? And you don't think about that, right? You have to fully stage it for somebody just to come in with their bags and feel at home, right? And now you realize that, and then I had to learn the technology to fully automate the process, from marketing to check-in to communications to collecting funds. So
you've got even all that automated that goes beyond what Airbnb allows you to do on the app.
Airbnb is the connector between the host and the traveler.
Okay.
Right? And they do an incredible job at marketing properties, right? And connecting with the right guest avatar with the right host.
Right.
Plus, they collect the money, they manage the money and pay it out. Right. And they have incredible customer service that helps you with any issues. But that's it. Everything else is on the host.
So what is everything else? Like, give me an idea of what is everything else, and then what have you done to capture all that to make sure that people? Because I'm assuming you teach other people how to do this. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Exactly. Great. So if you're teaching someone else how to do this, where are the gaps?
Yeah. So there's a handful, right? So it's right away. I tell everybody, especially all the students that come through all of our communities, and anytime I talk to a new host, is keep in mind that not only is this a new avenue to leverage real estate and generate cash flow every month, you're developing a hospitality business. And I didn't realize that until a year in. I was like, oh man, I'm a hospitality business first before anything else. Right. And all includes the entire guest experience from the moment the guest finds your property on Airbnb. What that experience is, you have to create that experience with marketing. When they land on the page, what their experience is with that, from when they message you, how those messages and everything else comes along in their experience, to when they book, to when they show up, to their entire process, to even when their entire stay, to when they even check out. There's systems and processes that we had to figure out to streamline all of that, to make sure that the guest experience was a 5-star standard. Or
that
higher.
way they can rate you a 5-star so other people will keep coming back to stay at your rental. So
that's the one beauty that Airbnb has created, is the review process, because the review process is really what separates. That's the gap between everybody that's on the platform and the few hosts that really know how to run this business, that are generating real money consistently. And it's all the reviews.
So it sounds to me like, because you said you're in the hospitality business now, and that was like a big, kind of a wake-up call for you to understand, almost like if you're a wholesaler, you're really a marketer. You're not a real estate investor. You're a marketer. So when that light goes off, so it sounds to me like you're helping people create true businesses, not just like, because I was under the impression that you were just helping people how to use their own house, or if they've got current rentals, just do a couple others, which I'm sure you could help them do. But this is to help people like just start a full-blown business.
So I talk about this all the time. I help two types of people. Okay. One is the real estate investor who sees Airbnb as a way to, as like an additional tool to their tool belt, right? So we have flipping, we have apartment buildings, we have wholesales, all that stuff, right? Airbnb is just an additional tool to add in there. So, and we can get into that, how it opens up opportunities for investors to buy different types of properties that they typically would never buy because of Airbnb. So I help those types of individuals. And my company, Hometel, partner with investors on their properties, where we step in with our business, run the Airbnb, and then we divvy up revenue at the end of the month, right? On their specific properties. And then 2, we do have the educational arm where we actually teach people how to go from zero from knowing nothing in the industry to actually starting the Airbnb hospitality business.
So I definitely want to talk about the first one for sure. Because I don't want to say we're up against the clock, but we got about 15 minutes here. Using this as an additional tool in the tool belt, as you described it, if you're doing your own marketing, which if a lot of people do, not just wholesalers, people that are actually looking to buy and hold, looking to rehab, if you're doing your own marketing and you've got this, it almost sounds like to me, this could be a good strategy for the person who gets the property that's in good shape, that might be a little bit over leveraged, that someone might be either close to or who is underwater. And you can't buy it for cash. You can't wholesale it. You can't rehab it. You might be able to do some sort of short sale, but those have I don't want to say they've gone away, but those are harder and harder to do now. Sounds like this would be the best strategy to use for a property like that. Am I wrong?
So yes, that's definitely a avenue that you can go down. What I like to focus on is the opportunities that Airbnb opens up for actual cash investors. So we're always as an investor, we're always looking for the best deal, right? Like the cheapest purchase that we can have the biggest spread on, right? Or the best cap rate on a rental property. With focusing on Airbnb, it opens up opportunities to pay more money on properties, slightly more money than a typical fix and flip investor would on a piece of property, because now your monthly income, it's 2 to 3x a typical monthly rental amount, if that makes sense.
It does.
So, yeah.
I feel like it does. I think you're right, but I feel like you correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you're talking about the best of the best properties. Like they got to be in really good locations, really good areas.
Yes and no. So I tell everybody in real estate, we focus on location, right? That's a famous saying. In Airbnb, I focus on unique.
What does that mean?
So how unique the property is, how unique the location is, and how unique the experience is for the guest, the better result you'll have on Airbnb. So yeah, of course, if you get a luxury high-end luxury property in A+ market, you're going to do extremely well on Airbnb. But you can also buy really interesting properties and create unique experiences to attract those Airbnb guests there. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the top of the top.
Help me understand how someone who is not in San Diego, California, someone who's not on the Jersey Shore, someone maybe let's just take Birmingham, Alabama, for example. How can I don't know that I have a unique property. I don't know that I have a luxury property. How can I make money in Birmingham, Indianapolis, Cleveland, Ohio, in some of these just normal, boring towns?
That's the beauty about Airbnb, and that's why Airbnb completely changed the game for short-term rentals. Prior in the past, when I got into short-term rentals, vacation rentals, you were locked into vacation or destination areas, right? And it was mostly seasoned areas. And you still have that in this country, but Airbnb has opened up the opportunity to bring short-term rentals to the urban areas all around the world. So it doesn't matter what location you're in. It doesn't have to be a destination location. I've stayed in one of my most favorite Airbnbs I stayed in was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. No one's, it's very few people are traveling to there for vacation, right?
Yeah.
Compared to San Diego. So it's about how unique you can create the experience inside the property, which will attract more and more Airbnbs.
Give me an example.
Yeah. So for example, that Albuquerque property, right? Standard home. It's inside a everyday blue collar town or location in this town. But this owner, this host and he was a real estate investor, he went above and beyond by bringing in designers inside the home. So the furniture was extremely unique. It wasn't IKEA style furniture. I was walking into a New Mexico experience, if that makes sense. He brought the
tumbleweeds. I don't know what that means.
What's that? Yeah. So just imagine walking into a very unique boutique restaurant or a hotel.
Got it. I got you.
Create the experience from the moment you walk in to what you see, smell, feel as you walk in there. They touched on that with just the design and decor of the home, and then brought the outside as well. So the outside was a relaxing, oasis, if you will. And it didn't cost more. It didn't cost a lot more money to create that experience with the design.
Understood.
And I found that on Airbnb, and I noticed how unique it was, and I was willing to pay more money and wanting to stay at that spot because it was unique compared to the cookie cutter hotel that was cheaper or was more convenient. So it's how unique can you create an experience for the guest with your property through design. So
I think that's really interesting for sure. Let's talk about some maybe like one-off properties. And I wasn't trying to crap on Indianapolis and Cleveland, by the way, because at least they have pro sports there. Birmingham doesn't have pro sports. So I'm trying to think of like a town that doesn't have a pro sports team. But let's talk about because I'm trying to understand all the different ways that we could use this model as real estate investors. Like, what about questionable areas? Not questionable in the sense that it's like a D area, but maybe like you said, a working class neighborhood, something like that. What about just like these properties that are just kind of, one off, they're off the beaten path. Maybe they're 10, 15 minutes from the nearest interstate, 20, 30 minutes from the nearest interstate, in a smaller town, and maybe in a B class area, C class area even. Are there opportunities here?
There's opportunities there, right? So
but that's probably not what this is best for.
No, because there has to be a reason for your guests to travel to your property, right? Obviously, the closer you can get to attractions, the closer you can get to a city, a center city, no matter what city it is. All of that obviously helps you be more successful with your Airbnb. You're not going to just have a standard style home in a C-class market and expect to generate the returns that I'm generating in San Diego here, right? Which is typically 2 to 3x market rent. But doesn't mean that's off the beaten path. I have friends that have figured out on the East Coast in North Carolina that are in the middle of nowhere, right? You have to drive 2 hours to get to their destination. They've started building tree houses on farms all throughout North and South Carolina, and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars per year per tree house. And it's not costing them a lot of money to do it, right? They have a hospitality business now. But my point is they figured out a niche and they figured out an opportunity in a rural area where they had family farms and things like that. And it's all about the experience. So my advice for that is, if you are an investor that's buying single family homes in C markets, but you're half hour away from the center city or the airport or whatever it is, you have to go above and beyond on the experience for the guests in the property to attract those guests to you.
So you've used the word experience and unique, those words, so many times, and just help me understand this. I might be a little bit older than you. There might be some people here that are listening that are a little bit older than you. Maybe the 45, 50, 55-year-olds listen to this, and they're like, I just want to put my head down on a pillow and go to a hotel, spend the night, and then just be about my way.
Sure.
You're using all these words and I don't want to pigeonhole a generation, but I feel like that is a little bit more generational, a little bit more of a younger type of crowd that is going to be interested in something like this. Just talk to the demographics of Airbnb, period.
100%. Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And that is another reason why Airbnb is so popular, is because the millennial generation completely changed the way that we share our homes, the way that we travel. We have a lifestyle of traveling, and like we see that in the entrepreneur world of all these nomad companies popping up all around the world. And I know you had Dan Schwartz on your podcast the other day, and he's an investor who developed a company to support his lifestyle of travel, right? And that Airbnb just came on the market for the perfect time to do that. So so let's talk about the travelers. What I've noticed, we have 3 sets of travelers coming through, avatars. We have family stays, so young families coming together and they rent bigger houses. We have the nomad traveler, and they're typically a younger traveler that are coming through looking for that experience, the unique experience. Gotcha. And then we have business travelers in our center cities. Those are typically our 3 traveler base. Now, when it comes to the host side, what we're noticing is more and more real estate investors of all sizes, from the mom and pop investor to the local developer to the national developers that are building skyscrapers right now specifically for Airbnb.
That's insane.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother podcast that we can get into.
Yeah.
But what we're noticing is that more and more hosts are older generations, is the baby boomer generation. Because now they have all these empty nest homes. They're able to open up their extra rooms or move down somewhere else and rent out their property full time. and they enjoy that connection. They enjoy the hosting side of Airbnb. So when it comes to the travelers, 100%, we're focused on the younger crowds with these, but doesn't mean that we're not getting older generations to book with us. But it's all about the experience. And I drive that home all the time, because that was my biggest learning lesson, was that experience, like creating those experiences for guests. And that's what they're seeking.
So I want to end with this. I want to ask you about the entrepreneurial house, whatever you got, because I feel like it ties in with everything you're talking about, the experience, the kind of the millennial, if you don't mind me saying that word.
Not at all.
What is it? What are you doing? Where do you live? Like, just tell me all about it. I'm
that's a whole nother podcast we can get into as well. That's a whole model.
3 to 5 minute window. Yeah.
So I live in the Epic Entrepreneur House here in San Diego. I was invited to move in. I've been here for a little over 2 years ago. And
excuse me real quick. What are the qualifications to be invited?
There's a whole.
Can I be married?
So, I get asked that all the time. I'm like, there's another opportunity here, man. It's great entrepreneur house for married couples. There's a whole application to get into the house. We have a whole process.
How many people are there? Tell me about it.
So we live in this massive 6-bedroom mansion here in San Diego. 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. We have a chef in the house that cooks 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We have a house assistant that does all our food shopping, a laundry service. We have a cleaning service twice a week that comes and cleans the house. We host the house roommates every single Monday from 7 to 9. We have a mastermind for the house roommates. Okay. So just imagine going through a startup or any phase where you're at in your business and living with your board of advisors.
It's incredible.
It's awesome. And then 3 times a month, we have community masterminds where we specifically reach out to entrepreneurs, invite them here. We have our chef cook a beautiful dinner. And then we have
gotten my invite. Where's my invite?
You're on the list, buddy. So that's essentially the entrepreneur house. It's all about how to take your life to a 10, right? And it's like, how do we bring every aspect, your relationships, your business, your finances, your, everything, your knowledge to a 10. And we built systems to completely get rid of the things that don't give us energy and don't feed us time and all of that, and focus it on what's building our future, what we're passionate about.
So this goes back to everything. This goes back to the very beginning of the podcast and your story and how you kind of got mixed in with, a mentor at a very young age, relatively young age. Mm-hmm. How you went to a school that kind of primed you for entrepreneurship, or at least gives you a skill, at least gives you a trade. It kind of just comes full circle. It almost makes me ask the question or wonder, why isn't stuff like this going on? And it probably is. I'm too old and I don't understand it. Why is this not going on all over the country? It should.
It's growing. It's growing. Yeah. I mean, this was started, the Entrepreneur House was started by a young entrepreneur named Chandler Bolt, who his whole concept was to live with other like-minded entrepreneurs to set, like, drown out all the negative Nancys that are out there. And just like, how do I live with, what's that famous quote? You are the sum of the total sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Right. And that's exactly what the Entrepreneur House is. And
that's why there's 6 bedrooms.
Yeah. We just brought on, that was a office that we just brought on a 6th roommate. We're like, screw it. Let's keep this going. But yeah, it's growing, man. Like, there's 3 now in San Diego. Wow. Organically just popped up, and now they're popping up all around the country.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. It's incredible.
You're a fascinating young man, Eric. Yeah. How can people get in touch with you? How can people understand more if they want to get a little bit more education on the Airbnb side? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So once a week, I actually do a live training on Airbnb investing in my niche within Airbnb. So people can go to cohostmastery.com, and that will lead them to my live training. I do also run a free Facebook group community. We have over 5,000 hosts from all around the world. in there. So we focus on real estate investors in that group. So that's called the Airbnb Profit Club. They can find that on Facebook or just go to airbnbprofitclub.com and that'll lead them to the group. So those are the best ways to interact with me. And then, of course, you can find me on all the social medias. I'm out there everywhere. So,
Eric, This has been awesome. I really do appreciate you. I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on the show and providing tons of value to our audience.
Of course, man. I appreciate the time. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Guys, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you rate us, you review us. We love you so much. We'll see you next time.